My name is Jack Gaines, and I am an AP Environmental Science and AP Biology teacher at Bryan High School. And I'm going to walk you through my project. So, started off with a lecture. Just this is focusing primarily on AP Biology during our ecology unit, which is Unit 8. This is the second half. I focused more on uh, as far as like human disturbance and other disturbances um, with this. And so then we talked about the different, in our case, the Simpsons Diversity Index, but if you're doing apes, it could be the Shannon Index as well. And we talked a little bit about the different types of animals for pyrrhic herbivory and keystone species in an environment and invasive species. And we focused primarily on the eastern red cedar. We also have a lot of Bermuda grass in our outdoor classroom, and so we talked about that a little bit as well. And some footage from our field trips over the summer in Nebraska. And then we got into succession, which is primarily a review for the biology students. They should remember the majority of that. Then this is where we started getting in with the fires and how we collect the fire data to know, how often fires were happening in areas, how it's used as a tool, and then how farmers can actually use it or ranchers can actually use it to uh, manipulate their productivity in their fields. So then they went to prairieprotector.com and played the Prairie Protector game. And so that kind of gave them a taste of being able to use fire as that tool, to use succession as a tool to help try to manipulate what plants are found and to limit the amount of woody encroachment that we see. And so then from there, one of the unique things about my school is that I have an outdoor classroom. It's primarily for apes, but I try and get my AP bio students out there as well. It's a pocket prairie. It's about a third of an acre. And so it's a nice big outdoor space and it's relatively close to the school. So it definitely helps being able to get out there. And so then what we did is we went and we essentially just did a biodiversity lab where we looked at the amount of species that were living or present in the prairie. We focused on plants. However, you could look at insects or birds, just depending on kind of what your interests and what your students' interests might be. But I'm a big plant guy, so we're focusing on plants. And we just started it, so we've had cover crops there. So it's just got the prairie plants, the grasses and the forbs planted last month in April. And so it's not what it will be next year. And so I just kind of explained that to the students that the biodiversity that we see now isn't what we expect to see in the future. And we used the prairie, then we also had a couple of control groups that were primarily a turf grass that we could use as our control to just kind of see what the biodiversity would look like in terms of both what we visually saw, but then also using the Simpsons Diversity Index to compare the two, as well as species richness, and then just total number of species that we see. So then once we did that, we put it all into iNaturalist. And some of these aren't plants that are in here, but it was only one, so just let them keep their one insect. But we put them all in, and had it set up to where it would calculate all of it for us. And so we have the individual ends for each of the species there, and then our n divided by the total number squared formula. Um, and then over here, it's doing the sum of all of that and then subtracting it from one. So we get our Simpsons index. We also have our species richness, which I just counted that up and then put that number there. And we have the same thing for our turf grass control. Um, and so Once we had that, then we did a claim evidence reasoning, and it probably needs a little bit more work to make it a little bit more rigorous. But um, this is the first year that we've done this, and so I just wanted to give them something to kind of introduce them to the idea. And so they have their claim, their evidence, and their reasoning, and I walk them through how to do a lot of that. And then for the further investigation part, they just had to come up with a question that we could answer with our prairie. And we had a lot of really good ones. I didn't, my eventual plan is to be able to burn portions of our prairie. It's probably 3 to 4 years away from that, just to allow the prairie grasses and forbs to really establish their root systems. Um, so we want to make sure that they're good and going before we introduced fire. But once we get there, I would like to be able to burn portions of our prairie. That way we can see kind of what fire does in terms of biodiversity. And then we can have a control group where we just mow it once per year. And then the other two, we could have either a spring burn and a fall burn, or we can burn one every year, burn the other one every 2 years. There are tons of different ways in which we can manipulate the different areas, but that's kind of what's going around in my head right now for that. And I didn't really talk to my students about that portion because I didn't want them going and saying, "Oh, Mr. Gaines is going to burn the the grass next to the school." So in order to avoid that, I talked about the using prescribed burns in order to manipulate your fields if you're a rancher, and then also kind of what was done historically. And so some of them in this further investigation question, they actually asked what would happen if we burned the prairie. And so some of them kind of put the two and two together to figure that out, um, which it was refreshing. I was glad that they did that. Um, Something that I would do differently. So like I said, I teach both AP Bio and AP Environmental, and I have some students where they take both, either the same year or they alternate years. And what I'm thinking about doing next year is it'll probably be for AP Bio. I'll keep the grasses or the plant biodiversity. And then I think for AP Environmental, I want to try an insect biodiversity. So hopefully at that point, the grasses will be tall enough to where there'll be a little bit more insect life in there. And we can go through with some insect nets and collect some insects and figure out, how much biodiversity we have there versus, again, a turf grass control. And then again, in the future, we can use burns to see and mowing to manipulate the areas to find out, what areas would have the most biodiversity or how it changes over time, and we document all of that. Um, I did this first with my AP environmental class last fall, and I did not let them practice iNaturalist first, and so that was one thing that they needed to adjust, or that I needed to adjust for them in the spring, was to let them have just kind of half of the class period where they could play around and just get familiar with the app before they actually went out to the prairie to collect actual data. I'm also planning on getting them to use iNaturalist more throughout the school year. Currently, Texas has a law where they can't use their cell phones during school. And so I tried it this year to get them to use iNaturalist on their own, and it was challenging for some of them. For a lot of them, they were able to do it, but some of them just kind of refused. They didn't want to go outside on their days off, which sometimes I don't blame them. But as one of my plans is trying to get them to just become more familiar with it on their own before they do an actual lab using iNaturalist. Um, I've also considered using the Texas master naturalists, and there's master naturalists in each state, but just using them as a resource and having them volunteer to come out and help us with our lab, whether that be with identifying plants, insects, just helping the students use the iNaturalist because they do have iPads that they can use in school that we borrow from another teacher, but um, sometimes the identification piece takes a little bit longer than what I want it to. And I don't always have time to just go and do the identification for them. So having someone on hand that can help with that sort of thing would be nice. But I would say, if you don't have an outdoor classroom and you are teaching AP Environmental or AP Biology, I highly, highly recommend it. I got mine done with some grants that I received from both the Rotary Club in Bryan and then also our Education Foundation. And it has been a game changer in terms of building interest throughout the course for both courses, but then also just having the option to take students outside to show them actual, plants and insects and birds and letting them just experience nature um, in a classroom, but in a more controlled setting than them just going and sitting outside. Um, I think I've already mentioned this, but if you do have an area that you can do this, but burning's not an option for you, you can do this a similar way. I mean, it's not exactly perfect, but you can do it with mowing. And so you can see how mowing would impact your biodiversity. Uh, I was also told that you can take a metal 55-gallon barrel and you can burn the interior of it and kind of use the barrel as a, a fire stop. And so once you run out of fuel inside the barrel, it's done. And you can just do spots inside the prairie. And so that's an option that we're considering if approval doesn't happen. And so those are some of the things that I've run into and anticipate running into, but um, that's the project that we did. And like I said, we ran it with both AP Environmental in the fall and then AP Biology in the spring. And kids enjoyed it. They asked questions. They got out there. They got to touch grass, which some of them don't do. But they were out there and they were having fun, asking questions, just kind of getting to see what uh, our part of Texas should look like. And so it was a whole lot of fun from my side as well, getting to share that with them. But if you ever have any questions, feel free to ask. All of the materials are shared with you. Thank you.